Let's talk through the case of positive externalities. Here I've got a college classroom. It's a college chemistry classroom, I believe. Pursuing a college education is an activity that has associated with it a lot of positive externalities. When you come to college, you are investing in yourself, and that presumably will lead to a much better life for you, both in the sort of spiritual domain of being able to appreciate the world around you and interact with other people better, but also to go out into a career and earn a better living, whether that's a better job or more pay or both. You're going to be richer for it one way or another. And those riches accrue largely to you, but there are benefits that accrue also to the rest of society, and let's consider some of those. People with good educations are very unlikely, relatively unlikely anyway, to go out and commit violent crimes. They stick to white-collar crime, which is maybe less damaging to society than violent crime. And hopefully they avoid crime whatsoever altogether because they're able to make a good living and are good citizens as well. But also, people that are college educated are going to go out and they're more likely than other people to cure cancer. And they're going to get rich when they cure cancer, but the benefits of curing cancer are much greater than the monetary capture of those benefits by people selling the chemo drugs or whatever that work. So there's a lot of positive spillovers. These relate to the positive spillovers associated with research and development firms by research and development expenditures by firms. Now, educated people are doing most of that R&D, and these gains in knowledge have positive externalities associated with them. We have a democracy, and the fact is people can argue better and vote better when they're highly educated, and so a democracy will function better if its citizens are educated, and that's an external benefit of education. And all these positive externalities are a big part of the reason why governments, state and federal, spend a lot of resources promoting higher education. Well, let's get to the graphical analysis here. I've picked up on where I left off with a graphing negative externality case. Notice that our supply curve in the market for higher education is the marginal private cost curve. I had forgotten to label these things. The demand curve that students bring into the market is their assessment, their evaluation of the benefits of going to college. And the market clears at price P0, quantity Q0, and that's that. Notice that our supply curve is the marginal private cost curve. I'm going to assume there are no negative externalities, so the marginal private cost curve and the marginal social cost coincide, so I don't have to think about that. But there are external benefits, and those benefits, the private benefits are captured by our demand curve, but there's these extra benefits. So our social value function, our marginal social value function, includes the private values, but also these external values. So there's a marginal social value function that's above the marginal private value function. I've written that relationship, but that connects social values and private values and external values. I've written that at the top of the screen. This was supposed to be a parallel line, but isn't. I've drawn the case where the external values are increasing with the number of students in college. I mean, that could be. Anyway, notice what's going on here. When we have external values, the socially best outcome, remember, our socially best outcome occurs where marginal social costs and marginal social values are equal. That socially best outcome is at Q star. And that's a lot more people being educated than would be in the absence of government subsidy. The Q naught would be the private market outcome. Notice, by the way, in both these last two screencasts, I'm adopting a practice that I highly recommend. If there is a negative externality, don't spend any time worrying about whether it results from consumption or production. When it comes time to graph, if it's a negative externality, model it as a marginal social cost being higher than the marginal private cost curve. Likewise, if it's an external benefit, external value, don't spend any time worrying about how to graph it, other than just say if it's a external value, the marginal social value function is higher than the marginal private value. I've seen a lot of texts, maybe half of them. I don't think Frank's text suffers from this, but a lot of texts will have you shift the marginal private cost curve down if there's a positive externality associated with production. Well, that's just ridiculous. It doesn't change the outcome of the analysis. It's just confusing. If there's an external value, marginal social value function is higher than marginal private value function, and that's true whether the externality results from production or consumption. All right, well, let's do a little bit of that welfare analysis. Notice that at Q naught, the marginal social value is way up here, and notice that the market just results in Q naught students being educated every year. Well, notice that at that outcome, the social value of educating one more person is greater than the social cost of doing so, but that person doesn't get educated. So that's surplus that didn't get realized by the market outcome. And if we counted up that surplus, the excess of social value over social costs, for all the students that should have been educated but weren't in the market outcome, if we counted up all that excess of value over cost for those people that should have been but didn't get educated, that's the deadweight loss from the market outcome. This is a unrealized surplus. It was surplus there to be realized if the government or some other entity had stepped in and done something different. But the market doesn't obtain that surplus. And here again we see that in the presence of a positive externality, the market outcome is not the economically efficient one. And I'm going to talk in the next screencast about policy response to negative externalities. Let me just say that when there's positive externalities associated with certain activities, the government can subsidize those activities, can require through zoning that those activities are done. I grew up in a fairly shishi community in the Bay Area, and that town disallows cutting down any tree with a diameter over 10 inches, I think, and maybe even smaller. The fact is, if you cut down a tree that's protected, and most of them are, you have to replant a tree with a diameter in excess of 10 inches. That's a huge tree, and it's really expensive to plant one and get it to live. But the whole community looks nicer because it's full of trees. One thing we see here in town as these developers maximize profits, it's a lot easier to move your trucks around, put in sewer lines, build roads, if those darn trees are gone. Well, low-end developments will just level the land and then build their roads and houses and all that, and then maybe plant some trees. But replacing a 100-year-old white oak with a 1-year-old dogwood. Dogwoods are fine, but there's really quite a loss there. Think about other things the government does to promote. Education. Government actually steps in and offers free public education for K through 12 and writes laws requiring that students go to school. So, that's an extraordinary policy intervention, and it's justified by in large measure by the external values associated with those activities. When you let your kid drop out of school, that kid is poor, but society as a whole is much poorer. That kid's going to be more likely to turn to crime. That kid's going to probably not vote, or if she votes, probably isn't going to vote in a very socially responsible way. And that doesn't mean right or left. It just means, in voting in an unthinking manner.
Made with Doodlecast Pro.